Lisa Campbell, Director of the Barry Center for the Arts. Welcome to our new virtual series, Bringing Home Barry. Today, we welcome Ramapo music professor Dr. Gilad Cohen and alumni for a segment we're calling Now and Then, Composing for Strings at Ramapo and Beyond.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Gilad Cohen. Hello. So I'm a music professor at Ramapo College, and today we have a conversation with a few of our recent graduates, Brady Bock, Daniel Heidt, and Jennifer O'Hagan. And it's first of all wonderful to see you all. It's been a few years. All of you have taken in the past the course Musicianship III Composition. It's a special course because the music program at Ramapo College focuses on popular music, right? On hip hop, on rock, pop, musical theater, some jazz. And this course focuses on writing acoustic music and using notation, right? So for strings and for woodwinds. So what makes it relevant for popular musicians, for producers, for songwriters to learn how to arrange, how to compose for these instruments and using notation?
So I'll start out by saying incredibly important. First of all, it sets you apart from a lot of other producers in the sense where a lot of people understand music, and especially when they're working solely in a DAW, they have the grid and they understand that perfectly. But knowing how the theory behind it actually works, how the songwriting works, that's incredibly useful. And two, being able to bring in session musicians and say, write out the part and say, this is what you got to play, like that's such useful information to have.
And the iconic producers from the past, right? They knew how to do it, and they did it, right?
Just to go off what Brady said a little bit, I think it is really important to kind of bridge the gap in communication, because in a certain circumstance, right, if you're speaking with any type of musician, someone who is solely comfortable in the electronic setting in a DAW with piano roll versus someone who is comfortable reading notation, you're almost speaking two different languages. So to be able to bridge that connection and have someone who's comfortable in the piano roll DAW setting, and to be able to, like you said, Brady, have that communication where you're writing something out, because a lot of musicians who are classically trained on acoustic instruments, if you show them the piano roll, they're going to be like, what is this? But then also for my own answer in that regard is, I think in any capacity, doing anything that gets you out of your comfort zone starts to have your brain work in different ways and allows you to kind of expand your horizons and form new inspiration that you might not get just sticking with what you're doing on your day-to-day.
I think these two characteristics you mentioned, Jen, are what many of our graduates do and do well, which is, first of all, being very rounded musicians, knowing more than just how to play an instrument or just how to produce music, and also maybe challenging themselves and thinking out of the box. I think is what we're trying to do.
Yeah. And for what it's worth, we use Sibelius in class. I'm sure for a lot of students that was the first time using Sibelius, which is the current industry standard. And it's hard to imagine, like Gilad said earlier, where George Martin or Phil Spector would be without the ability to notate.
What was your experience in the course? I mean, how new was it? How challenging was it for you to deal with the task? The main task of the course was to compose a string quartet, 2 violins, viola, cello, for an ensemble who actually came from the city, from New York, and performed your works. How was it?
It was totally my first experience, like, composing anything.
So you came to the class with the background of a performer, mostly?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I believe I took it my junior year, which I could not play an instrument at all until I was 21. So I was solely a singer. And despite taking, obviously, like, all of the theory courses at Ramapo, like, cognitively I understood it. But as far as the actual application, of applying what I knew theory-wise versus audibly what that was going to translate to, it was really cool for me to kind of bridge that gap as well. As just a singer, I can't sing 4 notes at the same time, so there's no capacity of me creating those types of sounds. So it was really kind of liberating in an expression, in an expressive sense.
So actually, let's hear a section from your piece, Jenn, your final project from Musicianship III, performed by Aeolus Quartet in 2017, I believe, right? How does it feel, Jenn, to hear it now, 3 years later?
Honestly, so I listened to it earlier this morning and I was nervous. You know, when you have distance from a project, I feel like every time I've listened to something, it's like there's a part of you that's proud, but at the same time, a part of you that's like, oh, it's like cringy. It's really cool. It's really cool, especially because that's so different from what I do. I would have never had the opportunity to have a professional string quartet play anything that I made because it would never make sense. But then to have, I kind of felt like a little bit of a proud mom for younger Jenn.
And it's good to look for sections and tell yourself, I would do it differently now. It seems that, you know, it's a good self-criticism, which is what drives us forward, right?
Yeah.
I think it's good. So what was the experience to work with live musicians, which is something we don't do every day in popular music, right? To write music that is such a collaborative project. And if you want to comment on this?
So the biggest difference is when we collaborate with other musicians, it's usually while we're also performing, which was a very different experience. Because usually it's, okay, actually for that section, could we do this instead? Whereas this, everything's already notated. It's at that point just talking about feeling rather than actual structure of the song, which was very different than anything else.
And often people ask, so what is the live musician's contribution? They have the notes, they have the dynamics, right? You tell them exactly what to play, when to play it, how loud to play it. How different was it to actually hear the live people?
Well, considering we were only listening to the MIDI before, it was night and day. Essentially, if you give the same piece to 10 different musicians, they're going to play it completely differently. And you can tell that they made their own choices that they thought would benefit the song, which I really appreciated.
I even think about the violin solo that began the section in Jenn's piece, you know, he just has this nice vibrato, then milking the single note. And single note, what is a single note? A single note, especially on computer, you know, unless you really start to manipulate it, it's a pretty boring thing. But a live musician can really make it their own. And I think of it as writing a play. We're just writing a script, you know, and the live musicians take it and they are the actors. They actually bring life to it. Brady, let's share a few minutes of your piece, all right?
Sure. There's very few things I remember about that day.
Uh-huh.
I remember being extremely nervous.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And again, it's an interesting nervousness, though, because let's put it this way. Until that day, when you were nervous, it's because you were to go up on stage on your own, right?
Yeah. So essentially, the biggest difference is when I get nervous for a performance, it's I use that nervousness to help me perform, like, and it brings out the best in me. But when you're just sitting back and watching it happen, there's definitely a weird disconnect that I wasn't prepared for.
There's zero control. It's in their hands.
Yeah.
Maybe you can't control it anyway when you're the actual performer, but there's at least a facade that you can. Like, if people are, like, nodding off, you feel like you can do something over here maybe to get their attention again, whereas, like, you're in the passenger seat, per se, and it really depends on how the performers, like, I know one thing that I noticed when I was watching my piece again is that they were such professional musicians, and you could see that, and how seriously they took this composition that I did as a 21-year-old. Like, it would be very easy for them to be like, they play things from, like, very, very esteemed musicians. So, but the way that they showed up and just kind of completely took it as seriously as anything else was a huge impact, I think, in the delivery as well.
Yeah, I want to think that a serious musician who take themselves seriously, once they play the music, they're going to treat it seriously because they want to make something special out of it. And again, it's interesting what you say even about the backseat, who's responsible. Once it's in their hands, they're responsible to make it good.
Right.
And good performers can make a mediocre piece better by really investing in every note. And the same thing, by the way, an ensemble can ruin a composition completely.
And that was kind of the scariest part of it, because you're trusting these musicians that you're literally meeting like hours before the performance. Right. But they did a fantastic job. We were very lucky for that.
Yeah. And it's nice when you deal with like such talented performers, like they're bringing their whole life experience. When you perform solo, you're relying on just yourself, or if you perform with other musicians, you're relying just on the experience of yourself and those musicians. But, you know, they have such a, accumulation of knowledge that they can bring to the performance, which is nice.
Brady Bock's A Ritual Under Moonlight, performed by Aeolus Quartet in a reading performance at Ramapo College. How does it feel, Brady, to hear it now?
Surreal. It's so interesting because that was the first. So I took that class right after taking Musicianship II, I think my sophomore year. And it was the first class that really pushed me to apply everything that I'd learned so far. And I think it still holds up, but there's so much that I think I've grown since then that there are little bits that I would be like, ooh, I would definitely change that. And That's definitely a good thing. But I think the fact is, without this class, I probably wouldn't have tried anything like that. And I think that was really cool to hear that.
Okay, so speaking of growth, what have you all been up to since, and where did your careers take you? Maybe let's start with Daniel. What have you been doing since graduating in terms of music?
So I'm actually headed to Montclair State for pursuing my master's in composition in the fall. And that's something that really, really traces back to the Musicianship III course at Ramapo. That was the first time I was ever able to get anything performed. And, if it wasn't for the Musicianship III class, I don't know if I would be going to Montclair in the fall. That was one of the pieces that I was able to send in.
And it was followed closely by another composition experience at Ramapo that you did, right? You want to tell us about it?
Yeah, that's right. I was able to set a Bachel Lindsay poem, and I was able to get it performed by Ramapo Chorale, and that was, as Professor Cohen said, in the semester immediately following Musicianship 3.
Going back to your piece, Jen, you can definitely tell that a singer wrote it, and I mean this in the best way because you can sing every line. Like it's so melodic, and I appreciated that so much.
Thank you. Well, one thing I wanted to mention about going back to the first question was like how I think the really cool thing too for having people who are not primarily acoustic instrumentalists play acoustic instruments is that I also think that the instruments were able to be manipulated in ways that they normally wouldn't be, because people were coming from not necessarily, this is a rule and I have to do this and I have to do that and I have to do this and this is how the violin is played. And I remember, Gilad, I believe you told me at one point in the course, it was kind of coming back to me as you were listening to your piece, Brady, that like the viola primarily doesn't play the lead melody. And I don't think it was in the excerpt that you played, but there is one part that I really wanted to show the viola, because I was like, no, it sounds great. It should be. What the heck? So I just think that that was really cool to see people with metal influences and other types of influences bring that to instruments that are not normally manipulated and played in those ways.
This is a great segue, actually, to Daniel's piece, because Daniel was attempting to write some metal sounds, chords, rhythms, and dissonances in the piece, right, Daniel?
Yeah, I was trying to incorporate a lot of the things that we were talking about in class. So I tried to incorporate things from Steve Reich and George Crumb, but also, say, from Tool.
Cool. Okay, so the performers, when Daniel took the course, were Aizuri Quartet, who were since, by the way, nominated for a Grammy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, okay, let's hear a section from Daniel's piece. So Daniel, yeah, where did your style evolve since? Where did it take you?
Yeah, it's a good question. One of the big things that always bothered me about that piece is that it never modulates. It stays in C minor the whole time, and that's But I feel about the piece very similar to Brady and Jenn feel about theirs. Like there's certain things that I'm proud of, and then there's certain things about it that drive me crazy. That why didn't I do that differently? But it's like Professor Cohen, like you always advocate for. You got to revise, and eventually I'm going to go back to it and really work on the kinks.
You can always do it, which is the beauty of our art. It's a type of art, what you're in charge of is what you write on the paper. You can go back to it 10 years later, 30 years later. What else have everyone doing since? And Brady, you want to share about your current career paths?
Sure. So currently I'm a part of the BMI musical theater workshop. That's been such a huge thing. Essentially, we meet every week and we present different musical theater songs and just get feedback on it. And it's interesting actually because it reminds me a lot of musicianship 3 and songwriting and things like that, where you're just constantly getting feedback about everything, and that's been extremely helpful. And I also am presenting a musical as of right now in September in the New York Musical Festival. Yeah, and that's what I'm up to.
That's great. And let me add, by the way, that BMI Workshop is one of the most prestigious programs in the country or in the world for musical theater, and it is free for all participants, everyone who gets in, which is wonderful. Jenn, what have you been up to?
Oh, Lord. What have I been up to? I feel like I've been all over the place, but it kind of in the best way. Right now I have two positions in the music industry. So I work with a mindset and productivity coach for music professionals. I've been doing that for about 2 years now. And that's with a company called the Rockstar Advocate. And then I'm also the PR manager director for a Cyber PR, which is like a PR, social media management, artist development company. I've helped curate a bunch of different live performances through a couple different companies. I've done a lot of work in music conferences and helping to put those on. I was teaching voice lessons for about 8 months at a really awesome music school in West Milford, which was beautiful. So I've just really had a bunch of different experiences that have allowed me to work on so many different aspects of myself as a professional and as a musician. I've been working on getting back into the creative side a bit more. I've leaned on the industry side for the past few years, I think partially out of interest and also partially out of fear. So yeah, we're challenging ourselves to kind of get back into the performer side a bit.
So could you share with us something you've been working on lately, and can you say a few words about it?
Basically, I wrote this song a couple weeks ago. Piano is not my native instrument, it's the voice, and a lot of the times I've struggled with writing the musical components for pieces. But I'm pretty sure this is one of the first pieces I've written that's just been all me.
All right, let's hear it.
Okay.
Most times I find myself
Well, I hear the string arrangement already. You should just write string quartet will fit it perfectly. I think it's a great example. Just piano and string quartet, you know. Daniel, what have you been working on lately in terms of composition?
So one of the things I was able to follow up my chorale piece with at Ramapo is, or something I am following up my chorale piece at Ramapo with, is a series of texts by the same author. So I'm going to keep similar musical material running through each of them so it could kind of be a coherent set. So this would be the piano intro for one of them.
So it's interesting. You add in a movement to a piece that you wrote a few years ago, which I always find interesting because the complete piece will kind of be a journey, you know, into your own growth, right? As a person, I'm saying, not even necessarily as a musician.
Sure. So the original poem was The Amaranth by Vachel Lindsay, and he has a whole series of poems he said about different flowers. So this one will be The Golden Orchids. So that's just a little piano intro.
Both Brady and I were enjoying the second chord there, right, Brady?
Oh, yeah.
I was immediately.
Yeah, it does what, you know, we often talk about in our courses, which is it evokes a mood immediately, I think. We're already in your world before,
thank you.
Before even hearing the vocals coming in. Cool. So any last thoughts, any things you feel that you've been taking with you from this course, from Ramapo in general?
So kind of going off of what you said about feeling just then, like without all the during all the musicianship courses, our focus is mainly just the theoretical. With of course like going a little bit into how that makes you feel, but musicianship 3 you really focus in on okay, this is what they're doing and they're trying to evoke a certain mood with that. And I think especially that stuck with me for musical theater because musical theater is all mood. Like that is all capturing a moment. So that has absolutely stuck with me. Specifically, you always said be a sponge, absorb everything, and that stuck with me at first in music, just hearing everyone's pieces, but like it really kind of works in everything. Just be a sponge, listen to everyone, try to understand everything. That's been super helpful for me.
I just wanted to say that, like, I thought Musicianship 3 culminated in a unique way that, for me, no other course at Ramapo or that I've ever taken anywhere else has. Like, even courses that end with a performance, they don't give you something concrete, that you really can bring, like Musicianship 3 does. Like, it's something notated and it's something complete that, you have forever.
Interesting. Yeah, I think it depends on your career path because the more music production courses, you can end up with an EP or with songs that can be very usable. But I think, especially for your career path, right? I mean, going for a master's in composition, that's what you need. You need to have a portfolio. And I'm so glad you actually managed to use these two pieces, both pieces from Ramapo ended up in your portfolio?
That's correct.
Yeah, this is wonderful. What was the third piece, if there was a third piece?
The third piece was a solo electric guitar piece.
Oh, nice. Wow. That's a good Ramapo portfolio. That's great. Yeah. Thank you so much for this chat opportunity. We should do it more often, regardless of any. All right. Take care of yourself.
Thank you so
and
much.
Your families.
And thank you. Yeah, thank you for doing this. This was really fun.
Sure thing. Thanks for Berry Center for hosting us. And yeah, all right. Keep in touch, everyone.
Bye.
Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thanks again to Dr. Gilad Cohen. Look for future conversations coming to our new Bringing Home Berry series. Thanks for watching.